Leave it blank. So I often say, don't add. Don't do anything unless you have to. And I got that basically from my mother's teaching. Hold your horses. So when I say leave it blank, just because an opening or a blank spot comes up, doesn't mean you need to somehow fill it up with some kind of ideas or conversation or commentary or analysis of anything. Leave it blank. Actually be blank. No, just try that for 8.5 hours, 3 hours, 16 hours, 2 days. Just don't know anything. Have you noticed how all day long you know this, you don't know that, you're looking for this, you can't find this, but you found that, and that's not just exactly what you thought. So there's a big long commentary on why it's that way. You're explaining yourself about this and explaining all of this. This whole thing is just a network, a web that secures the self-centeredness, which is unreal. Ego is unreal. And that seems to show up when someone that starts to get threatened. They, depending on who they are and how they're particularly wired, people tend to just bring up all kinds of things to protect them or to advance them or justify why they're acting a certain way or why they couldn't quite accomplish this or that. Leave it blank. You get it? You get that? What if I just sat up here for an hour and looked at you? You know, kind of left it blank. How long before you'd leave? Less is better is another thing that I say. Where am I coming from on that? So, well, to answer my own question, where I'm coming from is there's so much is stirred up by any movement you make this way or that way. So many other things are stirred up. It's like putting the pond is very still. You can see way to the bottom of it. You can see the fish. You can see the shadows of the fish. The light shines in the water. You can see the shadow of the fish on the bottom of the pond. But if you do anything there, all the silt or all that's in the bottom gets stirred up and you can't see anything. On the other hand, the self-centeredness sees that commotion and thinks it's getting somewhere. Ego mind thinks something, and we even tell ourselves, well, at least I'm doing something. And we'll even tell each other. If somebody's sitting still for too long, you're going to get scolded by somebody. So leave it blank. Give your consciousness a little rest. This is talked about this before, not recently, but it's coming up this very moment, and that's this is how you get the ego to fast. We don't really want to starve the ego because then everything starts to panic, and next thing you know, you're at the psychiatrist's office, or you're self-medicating. What are they calling that? Self-medicating. What if you misunderstood that and thought it was self-meditating and went into retreat for a couple of years? Probably not a bad idea. I thought I'd just self-meditate. I heard that somewhere. It seemed to be pretty good. Everybody's partying, self-meditating, misunderstanding. So it's always a way of working with the mind in order to, the conventional word for this is discipline. Hold still. Watch very carefully what continues to move in the mind stream. The content itself is not so important. So what's moving could be horrible, could be paranoia, could be thoughts about this, thoughts about that, evaluations, judgments, so on and so forth. Not important. The content is not important. What is important? That you see it. That your awareness watches that and doesn't add to it. Even if it's a blank. Something arises that is like, I don't know. If you know something, this is impermanence. If you don't know anything, that's about the closest you're going to get to permanence and still be in a human form. It's different for chipmunks. Yes.
How does knowing come from not knowing?
Pardon me?
How does knowing come from not knowing?
How does it come from it? Did you say how does it come from it?
Yeah.
We just fill in the blank. You're constantly being fueled by everything, your society, your friends, your relationships, culture, the television, our phones are constantly telling us stuff. And we participate in that because it anesthetizes our seeing deeply into what this situation actually is. Impermanence. It keeps us from seeing impermanence. Anytime you go in a circle, well, what's the big problem? And it has a low-level form of entertainment to go around and around and around. But if you don't know anything, if it's just blank, then it's just this, not separate from anything. If there's something there, then it's phenomena and it's going down. It's going to change, it's going to morph, mutate, dilapidate. What other words can we come up with? Deteriorate. That's a good one. So leave it blank. In other words, the next time you get desperate or upset or worried or threatened by something or whatever may happen, don't add anything to it. Even though you're coming up with a kind of a not knowing part of it, don't just load that up with empty beer cans just because you've got them. Just because you have a bunch of things you can shovel in there. Don't do it. Another word for this is renunciation. Renunciation in this tradition, as I understand it, doesn't mean you renounce anything. You just stop filling in the blanks. And in an ultimate situation, if that starts to show up in your mind stream, you won't want anything else. You won't want anything. I'm not saying that if it's cold out, you would like it to warm up. We're not getting ridiculous about this. I'm not saying if there isn't cheesecake being served in the other room, you're just going to sit here and say, well, I don't want anything. Oh, you probably go get some cheesecake, unless you're fasting. Don't do it. So it's about seeing, it's about the awareness of wanting something else. It's not about stopping it. It's not even about leaving it blank. But I need to say that so you can see the way, functioning as a teaching person, so you can see the way anytime some kind of openness shows up, which is your Dharma gate, your opportunity to see the truth, the nature of your mind is empty. Not empty of something, it's empty of its emptiness, therefore it's full. And you can't track that logically, although some of the Tibetans, the Gelugpas, try to track that logically. They're so smart. I better watch it. They might send out a hitman to get me. It was interesting, centuries ago, they did, the Jonangpas were trying to teach in a certain way that was contrary to the Gelugpa tradition. And the Gelugpas actually made a rule, I don't know, it wasn't Songkhapa, but it was one of his downstream from him or upstream. They actually made it a rule where you couldn't teach that because it didn't agree with the teaching of the Gelugpa, the Prasanga Madhyamaka school. Very interesting area. There's always some kind of shenanigans going on in every spiritual path or anything. Probably going on right here. That's probably my fault. Go ahead. You have a question? You have a question?
Can we fill the open space with blankness?
Pardon me?
Can we fill the open space with blankness?
I'm not saying that you can't, but that's a little bit, sounds a little bit artificial or a little bit, so there's an open space is already blank. But you're saying put something in it that's nothing?
If, say I'm in a conversation and there's open space where
Yes.
maybe normally I would say something to
Yes.
fill that. And if I say to myself in my head, I'm just going to leave this blank, is that extra?
Not really. Not really. That's a path. There's a ground, path, and fruition. The ground is the confusion. The ground is, if you were not experiencing some kind of difficulty or some kind of confusion on some level, everyone's different, you would not be in here. You would be somewhere else being completely blissed out and happy. So no, ground is the difficulty. The path is how do we work with the difficulty. In this situation, we train the mind. This mind, not this one. Train the mind. And then the fruition is see the truth. And what is the truth? Go ahead.
We're not separate.
Huh?
Nothing's separate.
That's pretty good.
I thought that was the truth.
Might be. Where'd you get that from?
You made it up.
I like that. Yeah, and nothing separate is a way of talking about it to people, students who are on the path, because that's something you can't get there to nothing separate. You have to actually see it. You can't just suddenly make it. It's like you just can't be enlightened or be realized. You have to go through whatever kind of scrim or whatever's, how many hundreds of yards are between you and the truth. You may have to go through your own particular path.
Don from Shenandoah Retreat, Virginia, has a question. He asks, how do we separate awareness from mind-concept consciousness?
Pretty hard to separate those, but it is possible to just watch them arise, watch them come and go. To use the metaphor, the awareness is like the sky, and the concepts and the ideas are like clouds. The sky isn't doing anything. The sky isn't even interfering with the clouds. It's just space. The clouds come and go. So it's a matter of don't add, subtract, divide, do nothing. Leave it blank. Let it just be a cloud, not a particular cloud that is doing this particular thing or giving me this particular problem or is here because of them or it's their fault this cloud has is packing. Probably lightning is packing. Do clouds pack lightning? You would agree with me. Might not. The people are not laughing at my jokes. I know what they're laughing at. I don't tell jokes. Further questions? Kyun?
When our mind goes blank, what do we do with that?
Your mind goes blank? Let's see, when mind goes blank. So you're saying you're kind of hanging out and suddenly you're not thinking anything?
Yes.
Does this happen on the cushion or when you're driving down Interstate 94?
Both.
Well, it couldn't be too bad, you're here. Really, say more about what you're addressing.
If I ask you a question, and then you ask me to paraphrase, and then my mind goes blank.
I'm trying to help you. I feel like it, does it? So paraphrasing could be, I could be, because I didn't hear you, or I didn't understand what you said, I think very slowly. You could say, yeah, I noticed that. I think some, but I think very slowly about everything. So you might say something and I might not be sure exactly what you said. I might be saying it, and I also might be, because I do understand what you said, I think it might be important for you to revisit that from another angle so you can be more clear on what you're asking me. And also the way if you change that, when you paraphrase it, if you come back and you've changed it somewhat, quite often the question is closer to what it is you're really trying to see or understand, and it's more workable for me to respond to that part. So you could actually say when that happens, I don't know. You could say it's blank, or you could just say, I don't know. I don't know how to do that. Because that would be what's happening. So it's not about trying to get to something else. More?
So is that a point to leave it blank?
Yeah. Yes. Leave it blank. Draw blank. Sir.
How do we want less without wanting to want less?
Let me think. Give me a minute. Wanting to want less. Just do it. Just do it. No, don't throw everything out of the car. Just whatever's in the car, whatever your baggage is. Just don't get rid of anything. Include everything. Include the wanting, include the not wanting, include. And by doing that, you'll find that you have exactly what you need to be able to understand that. And the most important thing for you to do, coming from this direction, train your mind. You don't have to join Buddhism, you don't have to be a student of mine, but if you want to understand what this is before you're a young man, before your body-mind goes back into the four elements, I think there's four, before you die and go back into that, which could be, 50 years from now, I don't know. But before that happens, find out what this is so that when that situation comes up, leave it blank. It's hard to do if you're faced with your own demise, you're faced with your own, anything happening, just leave it blank. Just notice this. The blankness, and this is very important, the blankness may show up as being completely flooded with something. This is the Buddhist teaching of emptiness, shunyata. Shunyata is not vacancy. Shunyata is seeing incredibly intense phenomena that is empty of an other. So you can do this totally with awareness. You don't have to manipulate anything. You don't have to think up shit. Did I say shit? I did. They're going to take me off YouTube here. Straighten up. I apologize. Just be with the open quality of one's mind. You'll notice as you're doing anything, you'll notice that there are areas, the more you practice meditation, the more you stretch the awareness, prioritize the awareness over the thought process. Not a fight, not trying to fight with the thought process, but let that awareness drift out in front of the thought process. How will that feel? It'll feel like you're leaving blank all the time. You have no idea what's happening. Because if you leave it blank, then your awareness is leading. You could say, if you want to use a relative image, you're actually leading your life with your awareness, which is can be profound openness. It's called a Mahavipassana in the teachings. Great panoramic awareness without a self. There's no self there. The awareness is the awareness. The awareness is aware of the awareness, and it's aware that there isn't anyone there. It's empty of an other. The traditional word for this, even outside of the Buddha Dharma, is Advaita. Dvaita is two. Advaita is not two.
Is the leaving it blank the same as leaving space?
It is somewhat, but leaving space has more of a thought process that is participating in getting you to do that. So it's a little bit more subtle propaganda happening, whereas leave it blank means it's something comes up that wants you to. It's like you're confronted with fill in the blanks. It's like the best way to do a crossword puzzle is take across and what's the other one? Where is she? There she is. Across, and what's the other one?
Down.
Yeah, and change them, and then try to do it. Is that helpful? So it's almost like a deliberately confuse the self-centered mind, so the self-centered mind actually gives up on looking for credentials. Ego is always looking for some kind of a credential that it's getting better. We're improving. I'm not doing as bad as I was. I'm doing better than I was last week. Not wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that it's circular. And the circularity there looks like a straight line. Anyone who's confused thinks they're going in a straight line. Anyone who sees the confusion notices that it's circular. It's an illusion. It's like looking down railroad tracks. It looks like they come together. They don't. You knew that. But have you ever walked to the end to see if they do? Preconception. That's how preconceptions work. My goodness, we got all kinds of time. Maybe we should leave it blank. Yes.
Is the mind that's flooded with concepts also flooded with preconceptions?
Yes. Yeah, they're partners. Preconceptions, ideas, concepts, constructs, right and wrong, should and shouldn't. So, and as I say so many times, it's not about getting rid of those. It's just about seeing it. Just watch what's happening, and your own wisdom mind, your own Buddha nature, that which you are. 1,000 years before your birth. That which you are. You're always that. This is temporary, impermanent, without a self, and dissatisfied. Those are the three marks of existence. No self, impermanence, and unhappy.
What ceases when we leave it blank?
Pardon me?
What ceases when we leave it blank?
The filler inner guy. The one that was sharpening his pencil, getting ready to fill in the blank. It doesn't really cease, you just see there wasn't anyone. Leave it blank and you see there wasn't anyone there to do anything about it anyway. It was all invented. When we fill it in, we actually create a self with an agenda about getting somewhere, filling that in and accomplishing something. More?
Is the filler inner guy the labeler guy?
Yeah. Well, that worked well enough for you to repeat it, so too bad. Filler in your gut. Further question? Well, leave it blank.
So you said when we fill it in, we create a self. It feels like I get trapped into not wanting to do that. But you often say it's not about stopping or getting rid of anything, which I think you said earlier. So what is the practice that will just leave it blank?
So the teaching, what I'm saying is leave it blank, and then everyone in here is going to have a different kind of experience of that. It's a pretty generic thing. Don't do anything unless you have to. Leave it blank. Don't add. Don't do the math. All those kind of things. You know, step back a quarter of an inch. Step back. Sometimes called patience. Something for each person may have a different experience of what happens depending on the causes and conditions that arise as each person. All the things that brought you into this room, that brought you into this matrix of this sensorium of body, speech, mind, this lifetime, everything it brought you when you function in a way to work with your mind in a way that you're doing some kind of inquiry about it rather than just going along with it, then how that shows up for each person is going to be quite a bit different. Some people will have a lot of resistance there. Some people it will open up very fast. Some people it'll open up for a while and then shut down in 3 months, 3 years. This is why it's so important to just keep going no matter what. This is why we have vows. That's why we do this, because without doing it, the ego mind will eventually get you to come back into the path of being a better person and having less suffering and manipulating your karma to get a better lifetime or whatever it may be. Andrew?
Can we leave it blank?
Probably not. But that's why it's there, so you can see. So because by saying that, leave it blank, then if you do that, then it's kind of a setup where you can see the way you spontaneously keep throwing things in there. But if you don't do that, then you're throwing things in there, and in that filling in the blank is happening all the time. So it's just a device, just a way of talking about it, so that you can be more aware and less attached to forms, thought forms, and so on. More? So it kind of goes around. You have to start out by the leave it blank, by the empty part, but then eventually you see that the very things you put in there are actually empty. So at some point it doesn't matter whether you fill in the blank or not, because there's no longer a solid being anymore. There's no longer an imputed self, and therefore everything you do is for the benefit of all beings, starting with yourself. You stop harming yourself. You stop criticizing yourself and murdering yourself, being hard on yourself and blaming yourself or blaming others. All of that is not separate. So we have to start somewhere, so we set up an artificial, just like facing the wall has been called by, I've called it and other people call it, artificial difficulty. You come in and or voluntary suffering or voluntary dissatisfaction. You come in and sitting meditation, if you're enjoying that, you're probably not doing it correctly. I've won a lot of friends that way. And when I say correctly, I don't mean But you can't meditate and be more relaxed, calm down, not be so in so much turmoil. Connect with the natural sense of just sitting still and allowing the mind to settle. Just like a mountain, the clouds eventually settle, the birds eventually land in the mountain. So there's that aspect to it also. So it seems necessary to set up some kind of tension there so that each person can begin to see fundamentally what's actually happening, and see and begin to understand the teaching, the Buddhist teaching of emptiness, which is not a relative emptiness, but empty of what we impute or what we think it is. Yes.
What does tension help us to see?
I think it helps the kind of hidden confusion that keeps spinning and causing us to feel rough around the edges all the time and not know exactly why we're upset, exactly what's going on, and try to get away from the bad stuff and get to the good stuff, passion and aggression. And so I think setting it up by sitting down and creating an artificial situation, sit down facing a wall, no one's going to do that because it's fun. You might do it out of some kind of idealism at first, but if you come into this place, if you follow this for a week, in here you're going to be sitting quite a number of hours. Not fun. Sit down, hold still, watch what continues to move is the way you wean yourself away from any kind of fancy strategy for entertainment that you may have.
If in a conversation there's a misunderstanding.
So you said, if in a conversation there's a misunderstanding between you and someone. Okay, I have it. Go ahead.
How can I know if something needs to be said out of being helpful, or if I should leave it blank?
So I think probably less is better. It's not that at some point, I would say start with that. Start with don't do anything. And if there's some kind of warlike thing going on, then just lose. Don't lose like run away, but you could say it. You could just say, well, maybe I'm not following what you're saying. You just slowly pacify the situation, even though you might feel some antagonism around it. But just pacify it, and that. Go ahead.
How do I lose the war when I want to be right?
That's the only way you can lose the war. If you want to lose the war, you wouldn't be here. You'd be somewhere losing a war. But wanting to be right, that's when we see that's where renunciation comes in. We want to be right. We see the artificiality of the being who wants to be right, wants to be correct, relative to whatever situation you're describing and interacting with another person, and you just lose. You starve that ego mind. Not by going to war with it, you just take away its nourishment, which is what? Winning. Being the one who's right. Go ahead.
Would losing show up as a concept?
Could. It might show up as very brittle and very not pliable at all, just some kind of brittle situation. Each person would have a different experience of that. Some people it would not have that kind of feeling at all. Might be more squishy. Do you follow me a little bit? I'm using kind of metaphors like that, but it's like it could show up that way, especially initially, the initial practice of it, trying to understand, trying to teach yourself and learn how to do that. It could create quite a bit of tension to be able to do that.
Would it show up as, oh, this is what I need to do to lose the war?
Probably not. You'd be really lucky if that happened. It'd be more like just being at a loss of the whole thing. Just a willingness to not know, a willingness to draw a blank, leave it blank. Just a willingness to be nobody in particular. The difficult part is in a relationship, someone's saying this, you're saying this, they're saying this, you're saying this, and then you get to the point where you realize that this other situation is it's creating a lot of tension. And so rather than put the right or wrong thing on that and think, well, I can't, I'm right, so I need to be right. So maybe not. A lot depends on the relationship, on what conversation or what's been happening over the day before, or the whole day before this area came up. If you were actually waiting for the period when that person spoke, waiting for them to complete their thought. And when that person spoke up, said you were in the middle of your thought and the person interrupted you before you got to your period, before you got to your end of your sentence, if you were able to just let them talk. What other people say have to say is much more important than what you have to say. You already know what you have to say. Isn't that a cool idea? Think how cool you are when you can be interrupted. Even when you're explaining nuclear fission. Nuclear fission, that's when you're fishing for molecules. Yeah. Andrew's way ahead of me there. So, and it works different for each person. Whoever's listening to this just may not work the way I'm saying it, but I'm addressing you. So I might, if someone else were to ask the question, I might talk about it differently. So one shoe doesn't fit all. Some people don't have feet. Don't ask me. I'll just draw a blank. Thea.
So I know this was more personal and specific, but relative to the ego, does winning and losing, are they different?
Winning.
Relative to the ego, the winning and the losing, is it different?
It could build up. It could build up into, I've lost so much, I must be winning. The ego could have some kind of ego is extremely sneaky, and it'll find a credential somewhere. It does not want to die. It wants to stay alive, and it'll find the most subtle kind of. Quite often, we meet people who are kind of full of their lack of self-centeredness. Met those people before? Yeah, the ones that are just they're just so humble. They're usually the first to tell you about how humble they are. They might not do it directly, like say, I'm humble, but they kind of get to it eventually where you get to say it. I do that all the time. That's how I know about it, yes.
At some point in a conversation with somebody, it seems like there's a point of just not caring anymore. How is that different from losing the war?
So not caring, simple way of saying it, and it could be different than this. If you and I were to talk about this, about specific situations, I might not say it in this way, but the way you're asking me, I would say that's not caring probably involves actually caring about this and being sensitive to it, but seeing that you're not going to get your way without a war, and so it's like, I'm just going to shut that down. And so it's like, it isn't like you really don't care, it's just that you don't want the abrasiveness that's happening there or the possibility of losing. So you just do which three poisons is that?
The possibility of losing?
Well, if you don't care, which of the three poisons is that? ignorance. So you have passion, aggression, and ignorance. So that would be, I don't really care about that anymore. You know, I got other stuff to do. So, probably. And it's not to be corrected, it's only to be seen and understood so that you personally can see the way you would use that kind of dismissive thing to get out of any kind of a tension. Not accusing you of anything, just saying that perhaps it could show up that way. Unyo, did you have one?
Not yet.
We have a few more minutes. Anyone else? Andrew?
If we're having difficulty and we respond by leaving it blank, is that extra or thinking?
Probably not. Probably not, but every situation has lots of different parts to it. When I say leave it, what did I say? Leave it blank? Huh? Did I say leave it blank? Yeah. I'm just saying when something comes up, presents itself, you can just not do anything with it. Don't fill in any, don't add anything to that kind of a generic question like there is on a form that you fill out. It's leave it blank. Be more specific if you want me to be more specific.
Can leaving it blank be ignoring
Yes.
the difficulty?
Could be. Yes, it could be.
Can we know if we're turning away from the difficulty?
You will eventually. You might, if you work with that idea, and if you're actually training your mind, if you're spending time holding still and watching the mind come up with stuff over and over and over again, then eventually the witnessing part of consciousness starts to get stronger and stronger because all you're doing is watching rather than adding to the thought. If you add to the thought patterns, I like it, I don't like it, it's good, it's bad, it shouldn't be, it should be, and all those things, then you strengthen the thinking process and put the awareness in the background. There's just enough awareness there for it to hold a cloud. There's a little blue around the outer edge. It says the cloud's in the sky, but there's not much sky there. So it may be, but you would practice it anyway, and then since nothing stays the same, nothing lasts, eventually it would morph into something that you would probably serve your insight about the nature of your identity, the nature of the identity of others, the nature of your relationship to the world, possibly, or not. Michael?
When that morphing occurs, is that ignorance?
Again, it's dependent. It could be. What do you think? How's it look to you?
I don't know. I think so, though. Maybe.
I think so too. Except for that one time. But it's not that at all. I don't know what we're going to do if I can't get you guys to ask more questions. I might have to just leave it blank. Yeah, let's leave it blank. Sounds good.
So we'll stand and dedicate the merit in the back of our red chant books. I'd like to remind everybody about the donation boxes in the hallway. We also accept donations online. You may want to consider monthly subscription. We have a number of people who do that via PayPal, and that helps us pay bills. We appreciate all this financial support. Thank you.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jio-san shi fu shi-son bu-sa moko-sa moko-ja-horomi. Let 10 directions out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.